this is my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of my booktube hats, and I'm here to film a much-needed July and August book haul. Yes, July and August. This is a large book haul because I didn't buy enough books in July for a whole haul video. And then I just ended up getting a lot of books in August. I am a sucker for $1 books. There are a bunch of those here. There are also a few new releases that I'm very, very excited about because this has been a good couple of months for new releases. So I'm going to start off with all the used books and then move on to the new books. The first used book I have here is one that I read a long time ago but didn't own a copy of and said I would buy for myself if ever I found a cheap used copy, and that's Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. Of course, this is a very popular YA graphic novel. I really liked this, as did many other people, and so I thought if I had a chance to buy a cheap copy, I would, because someday I think I'm going to want to reread this. The second graphic novel that I have that I bought used is The Encyclopedia of Early Earth by Isabel Greenberg, which I was super excited to find a copy of at a discounted price because I absolutely loved her second graphic novel in this same world, which was The 100 Nights of Hero. So I'm definitely looking forward to this. I think it's like the other one in that I think they're both sort of stories within stories with a folklorish, fairy tale-ish feel. So that's, of course, totally my thing, and I needed to have both of them. Need, of course, being a relative term here. Next, I have 3 2017 middle grade releases. As I've mentioned before, I'm looking forward to hopefully reading a good deal of 2017 middle grade. There was disappointment broadly, I think, in the BookTube SFF community over the nominees for the BookTube SFF Awards in the new middle grade category this past year, so there's been a demand, I think, for people to kind of talk about and hype up some of the new middle grade books. And one of my used bookstores has like a new and exciting middle grade shelf that they keep pretty well stocked with new and exciting middle grade, and I've picked up 3 that I'm super excited about, ranging from a book that I'd never heard of before I saw it to one of my most anticipated releases of the year. So the one I'd never heard of before was Carmer and Grit Book 1, The Wingsnatchers by Sarah Jean Horowitz. This looks to be a sort of steampunky fantasy world. I think we follow a boy who is an apprentice to a stage magician and a one-winged fairy who team up to achieve something, I'm not sure what. The world building in this looks incredibly cool, and I believe there are mechanical cats. I think that is what these are. And you had me sold at mechanical cats. Next, I have a book that I knew about because I had heard of the author before, and this is York Book 1, The Shadow Cipher by Laura Ruby. This is the same author who wrote the young adult novel Bone Gap, which I own but haven't yet read because shame on me. But I was aware of her as an author, so I noticed that she was coming out with a middle grade some months ago, and this is it. Now, this is a mystery, I think, that takes place in an alternate contemporary New York that has a different technological history from our own. And I think it kind of has to do with all this imaginary architecture that this alternate New York has. So this is intriguing to me, and also it's pretty chunky for a middle grade. So there's this one. And then I have, in my very own hands, a copy of The Glasstown Game by Catherynne and Valente, another chunky one. This is chunkier than I thought it would be, given that the Fairyland books were not quite this long in page number, but this is obviously her new middle grade. Now, you may have noticed that this was actually a September 5th release, and yet I got it used prior to that at the end of August. I don't know if the bookstore is getting donations directly from the publishers when they send out finished copies to reviewers, which is in advance of the publication date, or if they're getting donations from those reviewers who open their book mail and immediately dump it off at the bookstore. But either way, I leapt on the very first copy of this that I saw in print in the wild, and now I have it. This is about the Bronte siblings as children, and they end up going on an adventure in a fantasy world that they created themselves. And I would just like to point out that this dust jacket is like an absolute thing of glory. Next here I have a stack of 150-cent book on top, and then the rest of these are $1 books. These were all obviously used. The 50-cent book is Moonlight and Vines, which is a short story collection by Charles de Lint in mass market paperback. I have a lot of de Lint books that I haven't read. This is going to be another one. I already have 2 of his short story collection, and I haven't checked to see if there's overlap in what's in this one and those ones. But short story collections are a nice thing to hoard, and I like doing that. Next, I have a copy of The Goose Girl by Shannon Hale, which I have come to the realization in recent months that I don't know if I've read this before. I was under sort of the assumption that I had read it before because I knew that I had read something by Shannon Hale that I liked when I was in high school, but I didn't remember what it was, so I just assumed that it was her most popular book, which is The Goose Girl. This is obviously a retelling of the Goose Girl fairy tale. But then I stumbled upon a book description of The Book of 1,000 Days, which would have been like a new release around the time I remember reading something by Shannon Hale and liking it and thinking, oh, that sounds familiar. And honestly, when I've heard people talking about this, I haven't had any bells ringing in my head, so I'm thinking that maybe I haven't actually read this one, even though I sort of thought I had, and the only way to know is to give it a try. Next, I have the second book in a trilogy. This is Close Kin by Claire B. Dunkle. This is the sequel to Hollow Kingdom, which I got also for $1 in this same hardcover edition not that long ago and haven't read yet. But this is an older YA fantasy trilogy that's to do with fairies or goblins or something, and Goodreads keeps recommending them to me. So when I saw the second book in the same edition for $1, I just grabbed it, because like, you never know if you'll get that opportunity again. Next, I have kind of a similar situation where I'm rounding out a series that I've recently purchased earlier books in for also $1 each. But I have books 4 and 5 of the Chronicles of Prydain by Lloyd Alexander. So this one is Taran Wanderer, and this one is The High King. These don't match the editions of books 1 through 3 I have, but at least they match each other, so that's something. But this is Lloyd Alexander's most famous series, and I haven't read them, and I really should. So since they're kind of short, maybe I'll get through them during, I don't know, some readathons or something. I don't know when I'll get to these, but it's a series I've been meaning to read for a really long time. The next thing I have is a book that I know I'll be getting to soon, and this is Steeplejack by A.J. Hartley. Now, you may remember I showed you this book in a TBR recently because I am planning on reading this in the near future. I had a library copy out that I had renewed quite a few times, and when I saw this for $1, I thought, heck, I'll just buy this and return the library copy to relieve that pressure. But this is a YA fantasy series with, I think, a sort of detective thing going on that I've seen just about nothing about, so I'm curious. And anyways, I'll still be planning on reading this very soon, this month, probably. I'm just sliding it into that slot on my TBR where the library copy already was. Then the next thing I have is The Sorcerer of the Wildeeps, which I can't believe I got this for $1. This is one of the Tor.com novellas that I've heard some more positive things and some more mixed things about, but given what I've heard about it, I think I'll probably fall on the side of liking this as opposed to disliking this. This is supposed to be the sort of fantasy where the magic feels like it could just be forgotten technology and science, that type of fantasy. And the books that this author has written in this world have also gotten broadly recommended for people looking for fantasy with diverse representation, because these have male-male romance and characters who are people of color. And then the last of the $1 books here I have is The Brides of Rollrock Island by Margo Lanagan. Margo Lanagan is an author that I think a lot of people really admire, even if not everyone really enjoys her writing, if that makes any sense. I think this might be considered one of her more accessible books. I think people have a really tough time diving in with how sort of dark and gruesome her other things are. I don't know, I haven't read anything by her before. I believe this is a Selkie story, and I am hoping that it will be less rape apologist than the last Selkie book I read. Just, you know, crossing my fingers. But I think this has got to do with a witch who's like pulling the strings in this community by turning Selkies into wives for the men, and then like things get dark and weird. I don't know what happens in this book. I haven't read it yet. Next, I have a book outlet order filled with a lot more middle grade. There's a good deal of middle grade in this book haul. Because I placed this order while they were having their middle grade sale. They have like a sale on a different genre or type of book every week. So I have 2 that were on that sale plus some other things that I really wanted. The first thing that I really wanted that is a kid's book, but it wasn't on that list, is The Princess and Curdie by George MacDonald. This is the sequel to The Princess and the Goblin, which I read during the Booktubeathon and really liked. It's classic 19th century children's fantasy. And I finished that one and said, oh yes, I'll read the sequel, please. And so I went on Book Outlet and bought it. Next, I'll show you the 2 middle grades that were on that sale that I wanted, that I'd had my eye on. The first is The Twistrose Key by Tony Almjhell. I've heard enough buzz about this book to get me really interested, although I'll admit I don't really know what it's about. I think this is about a little girl who travels to a realm of some sort where the spirits of dead animals live. I think that I just made it sound a whole lot creepier than it is. I'm sorry. And the second one of these is one that I haven't heard any buzz for, but I've seen it in some bookstores and I keep thinking it looks like my sort of thing, and this is the Trilogy of 2 by Juman Malouf. I have no idea if I'm saying her name correctly, that's just what it looks like. But this looks like super quirky. I think it's about these twin girls who are like magical musicians and then stuff happens. Basically all the reviews say that it's like quirky and eccentric. And whether they're positive or negative reviews depends on whether that reviewer likes quirky and eccentric, and I like that, I do. The author is also the illustrator, and she's got this graphite pencil style that's really, I think, unusual to see in illustrations, but I really like it. And then the last 2 books from this book outlet order aren't middle grade. There's 1 YA book and 1 adult book. So the YA book that I have is Vessel by Sarah Beth Durst. I've been enjoying Sarah Beth Durst's ongoing adult series, The Queens of Renthia, and I'm curious to see what her YA is like. She's better known as a YA author. This is the one that looks like most my thing. This is about a girl who's been raised to be the vessel for a goddess, but the goddess doesn't like come to inhabit her, and now she has to figure out what she's going to do with her life. It's a standalone YA fantasy, and I like that. I also met Sarah Beth Durst at the Brooklyn Book Festival last year, and she is an absolutely lovely person, and that like makes me feel more excited to read more of her work. And then the last book that I have is a little bit intimidating to me, and that is Little Big by John Crowley. This is a well-known, I guess, sort of more literary fantasy book. It won the Mythopoeic Award, I know that, and that's always a good sign for me because that's an award that tends to be a decent indicator of whether or not I'll like a thing. But I think this is a multi-generational family story about a family that lives in a house near the border to some sort of other world. At least that's what it says. And now onto the new books, and not only are these all new books, they are all genuinely new books, as in new releases. So the first was a pre-order for me, and that is Arabella and the Battle of Venus by David D. Levine. This is the sequel to Arabella of Mars. Arabella Ashby lives in a steampunky Regency era with, you know, space travel between planets, because there's actually atmosphere in space in this version. And this is her continued adventures, and I'm going to read it hopefully soon. I hope soon. The next is a book that is not necessarily itself a new release, but the print edition is new, and this is The Raven and the Reindeer by T. Kingfisher, who is Ursula Vernon writing for adults. This is her retelling of The Snow Queen, and the moment she posted or retweeted from the publisher on Twitter that there was a paperback edition now available, I nabbed this because I, don't get around to reading ebooks. And also, if an author I like has books in print, I'm far more likely to want to own them in print than to have them in ebook. So I went and bought this on Amazon when I saw that it was available, and I think there are going to be upcoming print editions of some of her other T. Kingfisher books as well that I'm going to be watching out for. These are from Argyll Productions. I don't know if I'm saying that right, if it's supposed to be Argyll or Argyle. It's not spelled quite like Argyle socks, it's Argyll. But I think this has been, released without fanfare, so, if you're a T. Kingfisher fan, hello, these are happening. Next, I have The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin, of course. This is actually a signed copy that I got at the book launch for this book that was held at the bookstore where I volunteer. So I got very enthusiastic there and bought the third book, even though I don't actually own the first two. I got them from the library. I'll fix that eventually. I will. It's just not a super high priority right now. What is a high priority for me is reading this. I started reading it, waiting for the event to start, and I kept reading it on the subway home, and then I forced myself to put it aside because I hadn't planned it into my TBR, and I had other things I was reading. So I'm definitely going to finish reading this month. And then the last books I have are two books that go together. One of them is a finished copy, and one of them is an ARC. These are both books of the Waning Moon duology by Leena Likitalo. Thank you to Maya from Maya Reads for help with the Finnish pronunciation. This is a Finnish author. Maya is a Finnish booktuber. The first book is The Five Daughters of the Moon. The second book is The Sisters of the Crescent Empress. These are from the Tor.com novella line, although they're among the chunkier books. I don't think I'd call this second one a novella. It looks like a novel to me, but whatever. These are being pitched as something that readers of historical fantasy will want to read, and hello, that is me. I like historical fantasy, give me please. Also, the covers are sort of the most gorgeous things ever. Anyways, so story time on how I ended up with both of these. I saw the ARC for the second one at the bookstore where I volunteer. I was able to grab it. That was on the day that the first one was released, and so I ran around to some bookstores looking for the first one with the second one already in my bag, and didn't find it in any of the stores that I thought might carry Tor.com novellas. And so I went home and I ordered it online. So that's my little story about these. But these are apparently set in a fantasy setting that is inspired by the Russian Revolution and the Romanovs. I'll admit I don't know a whole ton about this history, so I'm not going to be able to necessarily spot what's accurate to that time period of inspiration and what is fabricated here, although obviously the fantasy elements are going to be fabricated. But still, these just look incredibly lovely. So The Five Daughters of the Moon was released in July, and The Sisters of the Crescent Empress is a November 7th release. And that's the end of my book haul. I'm really excited about a lot of these books. Let me know if you're also excited about any of these books. Also, let me know what you think about these 3 2017 middle grade releases. If anyone wants to do a buddy read of any of these prior to the next round of BookTube SFF Award nominations, I would be potentially game for that. Right now, I don't have any concrete plans for when I'm going to read any of these particular books, but I definitely want to read them all by the time those nominations happen. I know that's thinking way in advance, but I have a lot of books that I want to read by the end of the year, and a lot of 2017 releases across all age groups that I want to read before they get to be too old. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.